In a galaxy far from Earth, the war between the alliance of unified species and the Terran Confederation has reached its most brutal phase. The alien forces, made up of various species with advanced technology and centuries of warfare experience, are confident they will soon crush the humans. The Terrans, though vastly outnumbered, have a reputation for something far more dangerous than technology: their unshakable resolve and fierce determination. The battlefield on the planet Vraxar becomes the stage for a confrontation that will forever change the course of the war. As explosions light up the sky and the clash of alien weaponry echoes through the air, the aliens watch in disbelief as the human soldiers fight not just to win, but to survive at any cost. Corporal Jax, a seasoned Terran soldier, charges forward with his unit. His face, streaked with dirt and sweat, is set in a grim expression. He's been injured already, scratches and bruises that would have sent most soldiers to the medics. But Jax isn't like the others. A blast from an alien plasma rifle strikes him square in the side, and for a brief moment, the universe seems to pause. Jax staggers, his hand clutching at the gaping wound, blood leaking through his fingers. He stumbles to the ground, pain shooting through his body. It's a wound that would leave most soldiers incapacitated, but not Jax. Without hesitation, he pulls from his belt a strange, sleek device, a high-tech instrument unlike anything the alien forces have ever seen. The alien medic, watching from the distance, feels a chill of disbelief. The device hums to life in Jax's hand as he presses it against the gaping wound. In an instant, the device releases a searing burst of heat, and with a sickening sound, the wound is sealed shut. The pain is intense, but Jax's face hardens, and with a grim determination, he stands back up. Blood is still leaking, but the bleeding has stopped. He doesn't pause to catch his breath or wait for help. Instead, he simply wipes the blood from his face, reloads his weapon, and charges back into the fray. To the alien medic, watching this act unfold from a distance, it's a scene of pure horror. There are no cries of pain, no hesitation. The human soldier simply pushes through the agony and continues fighting. It's as if the wound never even happened. The medic's mind races, trying to understand what he's just witnessed. How could any creature endure such an injury without succumbing to the shock? How could they keep fighting after such a brutal wound? In the medic's species, injuries like that would be treated immediately, but the Terrans seem almost indifferent to their own pain. They seem to embrace it, using it as fuel to fight harder. The alien medic, now questioning everything he thought he knew about warfare and survival, watches as more human soldiers continue this shocking pattern. One after another, they take injuries that would cripple any other species, but continue, without missing a beat. Some even seem to perform their own self-surgery, using these strange devices to close their wounds, as if their bodies were mere tools to be repaired and sent back into action. It's a horrifying sight, a display of willpower so intense that it leaves the medic stunned, struggling to comprehend what kind of creatures humans truly are. In the midst of the chaos, the medic wonders if these humans are even capable of surrender, or if they would rather die on the battlefield than ever give up. What drives them to such extremes? And more importantly, what kind of future lies ahead for the universe if this relentless breed of soldiers is left unchecked? As the battle rages on, the medic knows one thing for certain. The Terran Confederation is not just fighting for survival. They are fighting with a ferocity that defies all logic, and it's a force that cannot be ignored. As the battle on Vraxar raged on, the alien forces found themselves growing increasingly unsettled by the behavior of the Terran soldiers. The sight of one human after another performing the same unnerving act left the aliens in a state of confusion and fear. It wasn't just that the humans fought harder than expected, it was how they fought. The moment a Terran soldier was injured, they didn't fall back or seek medical attention. Instead, they performed a disturbing ritual of self-cauterization, using strange, compact devices to close their wounds. Each time the procedure was carried out, the human soldiers seemed to grow more determined, more focused, as if the pain only sharpened their resolve. The aliens, trained in centuries of warfare and accustomed to advanced medical technology, were horrified by the raw violence the humans inflicted upon themselves in order to keep fighting. In the midst of the chaos, the alien medic, Qatar, watched as Corporal Jax was again hit by enemy fire, his arm seared with a massive burn. Without hesitation, Jax ripped the jagged piece of metal from his side, blood streaming from the wound. He barely flinched as he activated his device, and with a flash of blinding heat, the wound was sealed. He stood grimacing, and with a single, determined glance at his comrades, he charged back into the battle, not a second thought given to the agony he must have been in. Qatar's hands trembled as he observed the scene. He had never seen anything like it. The Terrans were not just soldiers, they were something else entirely. It was as if they were made of something stronger than flesh. Back on the alien command ship, discussions began to bubble up among the officers. What was going on? Some speculated that the Terrans had uncovered a new form of biological enhancement, using advanced technology to fortify their bodies beyond natural limits. It made sense, given the extreme damage they could endure without hesitation. But the more the aliens examined the humans, the more they realized something deeper was at play. No amount of technology could explain the sheer willpower the Terrans displayed on the battlefield. There was no fear of pain, no instinct to retreat when faced with certain death. Instead, the Terran soldiers pressed forward with a relentless drive to continue fighting no matter the cost. Qatar, who had been trained as a battlefield medic, couldn't comprehend what he was witnessing. His people had perfected methods of healing with sophisticated medical tools. When an ally was wounded, they would be whisked away to safety, patched up, and returned to the fight. But these humans, these Terrans, had no need for such care. Their resolve was their shield, and their pain was merely an obstacle to overcome. It was not just their bodies that were durable, it was their spirit, their mind. They did not just fight to survive, they fought with an unbreakable will that no alien technology could match. Qatar's mind raced, trying to understand this. Unnatural strength. Was it something ingrained in their biology? Or was it their culture, a deep-rooted belief that defeat was not an option? Either way, the more he saw, the more he realized that this kind of warrior was unlike any the aliens had ever faced before. As the hours stretched into a grueling battle, the alien forces began to realize that their traditional methods of warfare, precision, strikes, overwhelming numbers, and superior technology, were not enough to break the Terran soldiers' resolve. No matter how many of them fell, the others seemed to grow more vicious. The very sight of a Terran soldier surviving a wound that would leave an alien soldier incapacitated was a morale-crushing blow. Qatar, still on the front lines, began to question the very purpose of his training. How could he help soldiers who didn't need help? How could he heal those who didn't even seem to care about the damage their bodies sustained? As the night dragged on, Qatar's horror grew. He saw the self-inflicted violence, the way Terran soldiers seemed to embrace the pain, not as a weakness but as a tool, a weapon to keep fighting. It was no longer about survival. It was about winning, about conquering the very limits of what a body could endure. And in that moment, Qatar realized something terrifying. Humanity's true strength was not in its weapons or its technology, but in its unyielding will to fight, no matter the cost. And if the aliens didn't find a way to break this spirit, they would never be able to defeat the Terrans. The war had taken a turn, and the alien forces were no longer facing just soldiers. They were facing a force of nature. As the war raged on and the Terran forces continued to gain ground, the aliens were becoming increasingly desperate to understand how such a small and seemingly outnumbered force could continue to defy their expectations. The human soldiers were no longer simply surviving. They were winning, and their methods were unlike anything the alien forces had encountered. The sight of more and more Terran soldiers self-cauterizing their wounds and returning to battle with little more than a grunt of pain had sent waves of unease through the ranks of the unified species. Something deeper was at work. They needed answers. Lieutenant Zarnak, a veteran of the alien military and known for his strategic thinking, was assigned the task of investigating this mysterious Terran behavior. With his team, he devised a plan to infiltrate a Terran supply convoy, hoping to uncover the truth behind the self-cauterization and what allowed the humans to fight through injuries that would cripple most other species. They set up a covert mission, slipping silently through the shadows as the convoy made its way through a dense forest on the outskirts of the battlefield. Their goal was simple: observe, gather data, and return to their command post with enough intelligence to devise a counter-strategy. Zarnak's team silently followed the convoy, staying hidden among the trees, until they saw it, the key to the Terrans' relentless strength. One of the soldiers, a young human private, sustained a direct hit to his leg, the blast sending him tumbling to the ground. But before any of his comrades could reach him, he reached for a small, advanced device strapped to his belt. The device hissed to life, its sleek surface glowing faintly. Zarnak watched in stunned silence as the private pressed the device to the gaping wound, and within moments, the wound sealed with a burst of heat. It was as if the man had simply brushed off the injury, standing up and rejoining the convoy as if nothing had happened. Zarnak's heart raced as he processed the shocking sight. This wasn't a simple medical tool. There was something far more profound at work here. Later that night, while the convoy rested, Zarnak managed to discreetly make his way into one of the supply transport vehicles. What he found inside confirmed his growing suspicions. The supplies were not only filled with advanced weaponry and tools, but also with detailed training manuals and data logs. As he sifted through the files, it became apparent that the Terran soldiers had undergone a rigorous and grueling training regimen, one that went far beyond physical conditioning. These humans had been trained to endure more than just physical pain. They had been taught to push the limits of their bodies, to welcome pain as a part of their strength. It wasn't just about healing faster or enduring longer. It was about transforming pain into power, about embracing it as a tool for survival. Zarnak studied the training logs, which revealed the terrifying truth. The self-cauterization process was not a simple survival tactic, nor was it a mere technological enhancement. It was a part of a larger strategy, one designed to force their bodies to adapt to extreme stress. The Terrans had developed a combination of advanced medical technology and a biological conditioning technique that made their soldiers capable of withstanding wounds that would incapacitate other species. This conditioning didn't just make them stronger, it altered the way they thought about pain and injury. Pain for the Terrans was no longer something to fear. It was a sign of victory, a mark of their commitment to the cause. They had been trained to push through the pain, to keep fighting, even when every instinct screamed to stop. It was as though they had been molded into a force of nature, driven by something more than just survival instinct. The discovery left Zarnak speechless. The humans' capacity for pain was beyond anything he had ever encountered. Their will to fight seemed limitless, and no amount of injury could deter them from pressing forward. He understood now that it wasn't simply the technology or the self-cauterization device that made the humans dangerous. It was their mental fortitude, their unyielding resolve. The Terrans had learned to embrace pain and turn it into something greater, something far more powerful than just the physical body. Zarnak couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and fear. These humans were not just soldiers. They were warriors, driven by an unstoppable force of will. As he left the convoy, Zarnak's mind raced. He realized that the Terran's secret was not something that could be countered with better technology or superior numbers. It was something far more profound, something deeply ingrained in their very being. The war had just changed. And with this new knowledge, Zarnak could only wonder, could the unified species ever defeat a force like this? Would they be able to break the Terran spirit? Or were they about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever known? The war on Vraxar had already left the alien forces shaken, but it was the behavior of the human soldiers that truly began to unravel the minds of those who were tasked with healing their comrades. Alien medics, trained in advanced techniques to quickly and efficiently treat wounds, were accustomed to seeing pain as something to alleviate. But the Terran soldiers were proving to be a strange and difficult challenge. They were not like the other species the medics had encountered. In the middle of battle, human soldiers would not retreat or seek medical aid after being injured. Instead, they would perform their own self-cauterizations, forcing their bodies to endure injuries that no other species could withstand. At first, the alien medics thought it was simply a technological advantage, an advanced device that allowed the humans to continue fighting despite the damage to their bodies. But, as the medics watched, something else became clear. The Terrans weren't just enduring pain, they were embracing it. It wasn't a question of biology or technology, it was a mindset, an ingrained belief that fighting through pain made them stronger, made them unstoppable. The medics were repelled by this. In their culture, healing was sacred. They saw themselves as the protectors, the ones who ensured that soldiers returned to the battlefield whole, able to fight another day. But these humans, they were different. They didn't seem to care about being whole. To them, wounds were not signs of weakness, but badges of honor, proof that they had pushed their bodies to the very edge and come back still fighting. As the battle continued, the medics' confusion deepened. They couldn't understand why the humans would deliberately worsen their injuries in this way. They weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting to endure, to push their bodies and spirits to the limit, over and over again. One day, as part of an intelligence-gathering mission, the alien forces captured a group of Terran soldiers. They were wounded, but not broken, and as they were brought into the alien medics' care, the medics tried to assist them. One of the soldiers, a young private, refused the medical treatment altogether. His eyes, fierce and proud, never wavered, as he turned down the offer of help. "We don't need your help," he spat, his voice steady despite the pain that must have coursed through his body. The alien medics were taken aback. They had expected the prisoners to show some sign of weakness, of fear, but all they saw was defiance. The most surprising moment came when a more senior Terran soldier, Sergeant Arya, was brought in. Her wounds were severe, and yet she showed no signs of fear or hesitation. The alien medic assigned to her, Zara, offered her assistance, but Arya merely scoffed. "Do you think your bandages and potions can stop me from fighting?" she asked. "You think your science is stronger than my will?" Zara was taken aback by the sheer conviction in the woman's voice. She had been trained to heal, to help soldiers return to the battlefield. But here, in front of her, was a soldier who didn't want healing. Arya's eyes locked onto Zara's, and for the first time, Zara saw something she hadn't expected. An understanding, not just of survival, but of something deeper. Arya went on to explain that humanity's true strength wasn't in their bodies, their technology, or their weapons. It was in their unyielding will. The Terrans didn't need to be healed in the traditional sense. They had trained themselves to overcome pain, to use it as fuel, to turn every wound into a weapon. Their strength lay in their willingness to endure, to keep fighting through every injury, every setback. They fought not to survive, but to win, no matter the cost. Zara's mind reeled as Arya's words sank in. She had been trained to believe that survival was the ultimate goal in war, that every wound needed to be tended to, that no one should ever be left behind. But these humans, they didn't fight for survival. They fought for something more. Something that the alien medics could never replicate. They fought for honor. They fought for defiance. They fought because they refused to give up, even when everything in their body screamed for them to stop. It was a mentality that the aliens could not understand, let alone overcome. As Arya's words echoed in her mind, Zara felt a deep unease. The Terran desire to fight wasn't just about physical endurance. It was a mentality, a philosophy of life. They weren't just soldiers, they were warriors, and their strength was not something that could be healed or mended with technology. It was something much deeper, something that lay in the very core of their being. And for the first time, Zara wondered if the alien forces could ever defeat such a spirit. Could they win a war against a species that refused to stop fighting, no matter the cost? She feared the answer more than anything she had ever faced before. As the war continued to devastate both the Terran Confederation and the unified species, something unexpected began to stir within the alien ranks. The alien medics, once confident in their skills and proud of their ability to heal and protect, found themselves struggling with a new dilemma. They had long been trained to patch up soldiers, to ensure that they could return to battle as quickly as possible. But the human soldiers, the Terrans, were proving to be a different kind of problem. They didn't simply need healing, they needed to be stopped. The more injuries they sustained, the more they seemed to fight back, pushing themselves further and further, returning to the front lines no matter how serious the wounds. The alien medics were horrified by the idea of tending to soldiers who would just return to battle and face even worse injuries. But they also felt a growing sense of dread. Could they afford to simply let the humans die, or was their role to heal, no matter the cost? The question weighed heavily on General Zethar, a high-ranking officer in the unified species military, who had been watching the battle unfold with increasing concern. He was well aware of the growing reluctance among his medics, and the impact it could have on morale. But he also knew that the Terrans were a powerful force, not just because of their weapons or their numbers, but because of something much deeper. The sheer will of their soldiers to keep fighting, to endure wounds that would kill or incapacitate any other species, was something that couldn't be ignored. It was as though the Terrans had tapped into something the alien forces had never seen before, a resolve that could not be broken by pain or injury. General Zethar realized that the humans' ability to endure might be the key to turning the tide of the war, and that meant something drastic had to be done. In a move that shocked his advisors, Zethar proposed an unexpected course of action. A temporary truce, with the goal of opening negotiations for an alliance with the Terrans. His reasoning was simple. The humans' unyielding capacity for endurance, their ability to survive and continue fighting through injuries that would stop any other species, could provide a unique advantage to the unified species. If the Terrans could be brought to their side, their resilience might give them the edge they needed to secure victory. It was a risk, a huge risk, but Zethar believed it was the only option left. When the message was sent to the Terran commanders, the reaction was one of surprise, but not outright rejection. Commander Lennox, a seasoned and calculating leader of the Terran forces, took the proposal seriously. He had seen firsthand the unrelenting determination of his soldiers and understood that the war was at a stalemate. The humans had proven their strength, but even their sheer willpower might not be enough to win this war without reinforcements and new strategies. The idea of an alliance, however fragile, was not out of the question. If the aliens were willing to acknowledge the value of humanity's unique traits, then perhaps they could work together to achieve something neither side could accomplish alone. Negotiations began, and despite the distrust that lay between them, the two sides slowly started to find common ground. The Terrans, for all their fierce independence and refusal to back down, recognized that the aliens had resources and technologies that could help them overcome their current struggles. Likewise, the unified species began to understand that the Terrans' ability to endure wounds and keep fighting was something that could not be replicated by any technology or advanced medicine they possessed. It was this unyielding resilience that could provide the edge they needed, not only to win battles, but to survive as a species. The truce was fragile, built on an uneasy understanding that neither side fully trusted the other, but they both realized the necessity of cooperation. Small-scale operations began to test the waters. Joint missions, shared intelligence, and coordinated medical efforts. Each side learned something from the other. The Terrans were forced to adapt to the advanced medical practices of the aliens, learning to combine their brutal endurance with some of the healing techniques the aliens had mastered. In turn, the aliens came to appreciate the Terran soldiers' ability to recover and fight again, seeing it as a source of strength rather than something to be feared. The alliance, though tentative, began to grow stronger with each passing day. But both sides knew the truth. They were in this together out of necessity, not trust. The Terrans, ever pragmatic, understood the alien need for survival, while the unified species came to see the Terrans as a valuable asset in a war they could not afford to lose. Still, the path ahead was uncertain, and neither side could fully predict what would come of this unexpected partnership. One thing was clear. The war had taken an entirely new turn, and the future of the galaxy rested on the fragile shoulders of an alliance forged in the fire of conflict. As the war dragged on, the alien forces found themselves at a crossroads. The relentless human soldiers, seemingly impervious to pain, had disrupted the usual rhythm of battle. Alien medics, once confident in their ability to heal and restore their comrades, now found themselves grappling with a troubling dilemma. The Terrans, with their extraordinary endurance, fought on despite their wounds, often returning to the front lines with injuries that would have incapacitated other soldiers. Each time the medics attempted to heal them, they would re-enter the fray, only to be injured again, requiring more care. It seemed like a cycle that could never end. Heal, fight, get injured, heal again. The medics began to question the very purpose of their work. Should they continue to patch up soldiers who would only return to battle and risk even more casualties? Or was it time to reconsider their role entirely? Among the high-ranking officers, General Zethar, a seasoned and pragmatic leader, recognized that the war was slipping away from them. His forces were faltering, and despite their technological superiority, they had yet to break the Terran resolve. He had been watching the strange behavior of the human soldiers, trying to understand the source of their indomitable will. Their ability to endure pain, to keep fighting no matter the cost, was something the aliens had never encountered before. It was more than just physical resilience. It was a mindset, a belief that they could push through anything. This realization forced Zethar to make a decision that would change the course of the war. He knew that something drastic needed to happen, or they would lose everything. In a rare moment of boldness, General Zethar ordered that a temporary truce be offered to the Terrans. He sent a diplomatic envoy to propose an alliance. His reasoning was simple. If humanity could endure wounds like no other species, perhaps they held the key to turning the tide of the war. He believed that by allying with the Terrans, the unified species might be able to use their extraordinary endurance as a weapon, something that could give them the edge in battles to come. It was a risky proposition, one that carried the potential for both triumph and disaster, but Zethar saw no other choice. When the Terrans received the message, their response was immediate. Commander Lennox, a battle-hardened leader with a reputation for pragmatism, was intrigued by the proposal. He understood that the Terrans had been locked in a brutal stalemate with the alien forces for far too long. Despite their unmatched will to fight, they were losing resources, and their soldiers were stretched thin. The idea of an alliance was not as far-fetched as it might have seemed. Lennox recognized that the alien forces possessed advanced technology and knowledge that could be crucial to their survival. Perhaps they could join forces, at least temporarily, and strike a decisive blow. However, both sides knew that this truce was fragile. Trust had to be earned, and both the aliens and the Terrans had their reservations. The human soldiers were wary of the aliens' intentions, knowing that the unified species had been relentless in their pursuit of victory. Likewise, the alien forces feared that the Terrans might simply be using this truce to gain an advantage. Commander Lennox, though, cautious, saw the potential in such an alliance. He agreed to meet with General Zethar and discuss the terms of the truce. In the tense hours that followed, the two leaders, one an alien, the other human, met in a neutral zone, surrounded by their most trusted advisors. The conversation was wary, each side carefully measuring the other's words, knowing that even the slightest misstep could lead to the collapse of this fragile understanding. It was a delicate dance of diplomacy, with each side offering just enough to make the other believe that an alliance could work. The terms were simple. The Terrans would lend their extraordinary endurance to the alien cause, fighting through injuries that would cripple any other soldier. In return, the unified species would share their technological advancements and medical expertise with the Terrans, helping them to heal and adapt in ways they had never imagined. It was a trade, a fragile exchange of resources and strength. Neither side trusted the other completely, but both understood that they needed each other to survive. As the meeting concluded, the uneasy truce was formalized. The alliance was forged in the heat of war, born out of necessity rather than trust, but both sides knew it was their only chance. It was an alliance built on mutual need, where survival came first. And so, as the war continued, the Terrans and the aliens began to fight side by side, each learning from the other, slowly realizing that they had more in common than they had ever imagined. But as the battlefront shifted and the war grew even more desperate, neither side could forget the fragile nature of their partnership. Would it hold, or would it collapse under the weight of their differences? Only time would tell. As the war between the Terran Confederation and the unified species reached its boiling point, both sides faced an even greater threat, one that could wipe them both out in an instant. A rogue faction of aliens, operating outside the established forces, had developed a terrifying bioweapon capable of incapacitating any species, no matter how strong or resilient. This new weapon was unlike anything either side had seen before. It didn't target weapons or technology. It targeted the very core of life itself, the nervous system. Once activated, the weapon would release a neural agent that could paralyze, incapacitate, and ultimately destroy even the toughest of soldiers. It was a weapon of mass destruction, designed to be used on a scale far beyond anything humanity or the unified species had ever encountered. Both sides were thrown into a panic, unsure of how to respond to such a threat. If left unchecked, this bioweapon could be the end of their war and their entire civilizations. In the face of this terrifying new weapon, the only option was a desperate mission to infiltrate the facility where it was being developed. But the challenge was insurmountable. The Terran soldiers knew that even if they could get inside the compound, the odds of making it out alive were slim. Yet they were willing to take the risk. Commander Lennox, ever the pragmatist, made the decision to send his best soldiers into the heart of the enemy's territory. Their mission was clear: destroy the weapon before it could be deployed and bring an end to the war once and for all. The alien medics, now deeply involved with the Terrans after their uneasy alliance, were not about to let their newfound comrades face this mission alone. They, too, understood the stakes and the terrifying consequences of failure. Despite their initial shock and hesitation at the human soldiers' ability to endure wounds that would break any other species, they knew that their medical skills would be needed. They began to prepare for what they knew would be a gruesome mission, one where the soldiers would be injured, perhaps mortally so, but would refuse to stop fighting. The medics braced themselves for the inevitable, a continuous cycle of treating injuries that would only worsen with each step forward. But they also understood the one advantage the Terrans had: their ability to survive the unthinkable. As the Terran soldiers made their way toward the facility, the bioweapon's devastating Potential weighed heavily on their minds. The alien facility was heavily guarded, but they had trained for this moment. This was a mission that had no room for failure. The humans moved with precision, infiltrating the base with stealth and speed, evading traps and enemy patrols. But, as they expected, the mission soon turned violent. The first wave of resistance hit them hard. Alien soldiers poured into the corridors, and Terran soldiers fell, bleeding from injuries that would have knocked out any other soldier. Yet, instead of slowing down, the Terrans pushed forward, their faces grim but determined. When one of their own Sergeant Aria took a blast to the side, she didn't hesitate. With her heart racing and her comrades pushing forward, she pulled out her high-tech cauterizer and sealed the wound herself. It was painful, grueling, but it worked. Within moments, she was back on her feet, ready to continue the fight. The medics, witnessing the Terrans' resilience firsthand, were both awed and horrified. Their advanced medical tools could do little to help in this kind of brutal warfare. They could patch up soldiers, but it was the human ability to endure, both the physical and the mental, that allowed them to continue. The self-cauterization, once thought to be an anomaly, now became their saving grace. As more Terran soldiers were wounded, they performed the same grueling procedure, each soldier pushing past their pain, each one refusing to stop, to give in. When an alien medic, desperate to help, offered assistance to one soldier, he was met with a steady refusal. "We don't need healing," the soldier said, his voice strained but resolute. "Just keep us in the fight." The Terrans' capacity to endure became the deciding factor. As the hours wore on and the mission reached its climax, the alien forces began to realize something incredible. The humans weren't just fighting with weapons or technology. They were fighting with something far stronger. Their will to survive, their refusal to surrender, had turned the tide. The bioweapon, once thought to be unstoppable, began to lose its edge. With each passing minute, the Terran soldiers pushed closer to their goal, slowly and painfully dismantling the facility. By the time the weapon was destroyed, the cost had been immense. Many Terran soldiers had fallen, their bodies broken and battered. But their strength, their ability to endure wounds that should have killed them, had given them the chance to stop the weapon before it could destroy them all. As the dust settled, the Terrans, though exhausted and covered in wounds, stood victorious. The alliance, once formed out of necessity, had become something far more powerful. It was no longer just about survival. It was about recognizing the strength in each other. In that moment, humanity's will to survive had changed the course of the war, proving once again that their ability to endure was their greatest weapon. The final confrontation had come to an end. The Terran Confederation, against all odds, had destroyed the bioweapon that had threatened to annihilate both sides. With that, the tide of the war shifted in favor of the humans, and the unified species, though defeated, were forced to come to terms with the sheer determination and resilience of the Terrans. The alien forces, having witnessed humanity's incredible ability to fight through pain and death, found themselves in a strange position. Their victory had come at a high cost, but it was undeniable. The Terrans had won, not through sheer force of arms or advanced technology, but through something far more fundamental: their will to survive. Lieutenant Zarnak, who had once looked at the Terrans with contempt and disgust, now saw them through a different lens. He had watched as their soldiers, wounded and battered, continued to push forward, refusing to surrender. At first, he had thought it was barbaric, reckless even. But now, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, he couldn't help but respect the human spirit. Their capacity for suffering, their refusal to give in, had become something he could never truly understand, yet he now saw it as a form of strength, a strength that no alien force could match. The alien medics, too, had undergone a transformation. For so long, they had viewed their role as one of healing and restoring life. They had believed that their advanced medical technology could solve all problems. that their ability to mend broken bodies was the key to victory. But the Terrans had shown them something new. Healing wasn't just about fixing wounds. It was about understanding the mindset behind the soldier. The medics had seen Terran soldiers, gravely wounded, performing their self-cauterization procedures, pushing through pain that would have incapacitated any other species. It wasn't just the body that needed to be healed. It was the mind, the heart, the unwavering determination to keep going no matter the cost. The alien medics had learned to respect the Terran soldiers in a way they had never thought possible. They understood now that healing didn't always mean saving lives. It meant recognizing the strength to keep fighting, even when death seemed inevitable. With the war officially over, the peace that followed was uneasy, but necessary. Both sides had paid a heavy price, but they had also learned valuable lessons from each other. The Terrans had shown the unified species what it meant to endure, to fight not just for survival, but with a spirit that refused to be crushed. And the unified species had shown the humans the importance of strategy, diplomacy, and technology in warfare. The two species, once enemies locked in a bitter struggle for dominance, had come to understand that they each had something unique to offer. The humans, with their unstoppable will and unbreakable spirit, had proven that technology and strength alone could never win a war. It was the heart and mind of the soldiers that determined the outcome. The aliens, for their part, had learned that healing was not just about fixing physical wounds. It was about understanding the heart of the soldier, about acknowledging the incredible will that kept them standing even when everything else told them to fall. The peace that followed the war was fragile. Trust between the two sides had to be rebuilt slowly, and there were still those who harbored resentment and fear. But as time passed, something remarkable began to happen. The Terrans and the unified species, once locked in bitter conflict, began to share knowledge, work together, and find common ground. The relationship was tentative at first, but it was a beginning, a new chapter in a long history of war and struggle. In the end, the humans had not only survived the war, they had changed the way their enemies saw them. Their greatest weapon was not their advanced technology, nor their superior strength. It was their refusal to give up, their will to fight, and the indomitable spirit that burned in each and every one of them. The Terran soldier would rather die on the battlefield than give up the fight, and that was a lesson the aliens would never forget. The war had ended, but the respect between the two species had only just begun. And in the heart of every soldier, the fire of determination would never be extinguished.